Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Namo Namaha, Jai Ganesha. Please visit our website at classicalyoga.org, and thank you for your support. The pros and cons of following a religious path and the problem of mixing religions together. If you listen to our podcast on Bhume Mata and the sunrise, learning from Bhume Mata, a lot of this will become clear from the outset. But obviously, there are many religious traditions throughout the world, and most of us have been influenced by one or more of these traditions. So what's the benefit of finding one, sticking to it, and following it? If we look at the analogy of a mountain, if we want to reach the top of the mountain, we obviously have to find a path or create a brand new one. And relevantly, the various religions of the world are already established religious paths. And remember, we're talking about a very broad understanding, because within each of these religious paths are many subsects and nuances. But once we find a path that's comfortable for us, such as Hinduism, for example, then it behooves us to be committed to that, understand it, stick to it, because the benefits are reaped by following an established religious tradition that has been walked by many people before. Just like a well-trodden path up the mountain, it's been followed by numerous people before us, and it's all laid out. The teachers, for example, are like the Sherpas, who have followed the entire path to the top, and they come down and help others to the top also. So this logic would apply to really most anything in life. If we choose a specific profession, we fully dedicate ourselves to that profession. And yes, there's competition in life in general. But when it comes to religion, what is the con here? And that's an appropriate word, because sometimes it becomes a con and dishonest. The cons of following a religious path are when we become a fundamentalist, falsely assuming that our religious tradition, our path, is the one and only path. And in a way, this is understandable. If we grow up and we're only surrounded by like-minded people in a specific religion, for example, that's all we know, and we see everything merely as a reflection of that. And if that works for one, fine. The problem comes in, obviously, when we become a negative fundamentalist, and then we start claiming, when we have encounters with other religions, that those religions are totally false or outright evil. And often when people encounter this negative fundamentalist mindset, or when one actually becomes a fundamentalist in this sense and realizes it at some point, they may completely abandon religion altogether. And some may quasi-stay into religion by claiming they're spiritual but not religious. This attitude often actually results in the fundamentalist universalist. Fundamentalist in the sense that, for the most part, the spiritual but not religious person is doing something from a specific religion of the world, but claiming that this is now universal. Today's yoga epitomizes this spiritual but not religious attitude and the fundamentalist universalist mindset. Doing yoga, which factually is all about the Hindu religion, and then claiming that it's really not Hinduism and that it's universal, and then it fits into anybody's religion. See the obvious fundamentalist universalist mindset there? This attitude is actually fostered by many Hindus who sometimes don't even want to use the word Hindu. They'll say Vedantist or Sanatan Dharma. And they truly believe that Hinduism is the one universal religion from which everything else comes. And for the most part, most of these are Vaishnava Hindus, where they have wrongly assumed that Vishnu, and especially in the form of Krishna, is the God, and they'll use the word God, from which everything comes. It's clear here to see the swing between being a pure fundamentalist and then a fundamentalist universal. It's a back and forth move. And there are others who would probably call themselves New Age, and they take a little bit from various religions of the world, mostly Eastern religions, but many in Christianity also. And then they purport to be spiritual teachers. Now, there's something different in this than simply teaching comparative religions, such as Joseph Campbell did. There, one is recognizing they're not representing any specific religion, but they're simply teaching specific religious principles and traditions in a comparative religious study. However, in the New Age, you have those who are holding themselves out as these very enlightened so-called spiritual teachers, and they just take a little bit from this tradition, a little bit from that tradition. At this point, one has to ask an obvious quote-unquote question. Well, where did all of these religions come from that we can so selectively borrow from? The religious traditions of the world only came into existence like well-worn paths by those who were completely devoted to them. And furthermore, in actually denying these devoted religious people in the specific religions and then using their texts, how does one think those texts got there to begin with? So here's the basic swing of life, the Sada Lola Hara of life, the truth of the swing of life, that as we go through it, it's hopefully destroying our ignorance ultimately. That we go from one side to the other. We're a fundamentalist, thinking all of the religions are outright wrong or even evil. Or the fundamentalist universalist, we're doing something from a specific religion like Hinduism and claiming it to be universal. That's why in the yoga movement they'll say yoga is for everybody. That's no different than saying Jesus is for everybody. And then you have the New Age spiritual so-called teachers that just glean from the different religious traditions of the world and then hold themselves out as a spiritual master, if you will. That's where the problem comes in. Remember, there's a huge difference between being a student and a teacher. A New Age teacher of the many religions of the world has to recognize that, well, wait a minute. They never really dedicated their lives to any one of these religions, so how could they fully know that path? They never followed one path, so how would they know it? It's wise to consider that there may be a middle ground. Instead of leaning to the fundamentalist side or the fundamentalist universalist side or the New Age universalist side, perhaps there's a middle ground. In other words, one's religious tradition is not the way, and it is not no way or always the fundamentalist universalist and the New Age universalist, but a way. Would this not be a mature attitude? For one to declare that their religion, their path is a way. It's not the way, and it's not no way, because it's very specific in its teachings and practices. Now again, it's wonderful to study comparative religions. I think we should all do this, so we get to know our fellow human beings on the planet. However, incorporating the teachings and practices of the different religions of the world can be disconcerting at best. Many people can attest that when they have brought in many different religious teachings and practices into their life, it can be confusing at best, or there can be outright psychic disturbances. Remember, the meaning of the word psyche is actually soul. And initially, that's what a psychiatrist is supposed to be, someone who's coming from a soul perspective. So when we mix together the different religious teachings and practices in our own personal life, this can become very confusing and even mentally and emotionally very upsetting. To understand this, simply imagine, say you're a Christian and you invite a Hindu and a Muslim to come live in your home. How comfortable do you think that would be? When one goes to a Christian church, a Catholic church, for example, do you find a Hindu off in the corner doing a puja? If you go to a Hindu mandir, do you find someone in the corner preaching about Jesus and reading from the Bible? Not only from a purely outer standpoint does this become self-defeating and actually ridiculous, but all the religions of the world are about a contact with the spirit realm. And yes, there are spirit realms. Just as people gather, for example, on a Sunday in their respective religious sanctuaries, synagogue, churches, mosques, mandirs. And the community is also focusing on very specific spirit beings. And just as it would inevitably be a conflict if in your home you had adherents and even priests of different religions living intimately together with you. So too, if we're courting the spirit plane beings, there can be a very disturbing experience. It is very simply a conflict of interest. This should appear to be very logical, but it seems when we come to religion and spirituality, sometimes these things can become rather fuzzy at best. Just think in the workaday world. I mean, if you go into a hospital and you go to the cardiology unit, you don't expect a person to be coming in there talking about electrical wiring and plumbing and how to invest in the stock market. All of these things have their importance within their relative job professions. We can certainly respect the various occupations of the world without illogically and often healthily mixing them together. So too with the different religions of the world. We can respect them, respect these specific paths, but mixing them together can often be disturbing at best. So if one is truly interested in the religious spiritual realm of life, do a comparative religious study. And if you find that one of these religions really appeals to you, one of these paths up the mountain, well, then fully commit to it. Respect the other paths, but it makes no sense to walk on those paths. And certainly don't bring those into your personal life. Certainly not if you want to have a mentally and emotionally stable life. Remember, we don't want to be closed-minded, like the negative fundamentalist. But we don't want to be so open-minded that our brains fall out. So if you follow one of the great religions of the world, enjoy the pros and try to avoid the cons. And assuredly, in any one life or another, we may experience being a pure, if you will, fundamentalist, or a fundamentalist universalist, or a New Age universalist as we swing back and forth until we finally find a balance in the middle. And respectfully, and in a very healthy physical, mental, and emotional way, realize that one's religion is a way. It's not the way, and it's not no way or all ways. Enjoy this swing of life, as we often swing from one extreme to the other in many areas of life, until we finally achieve a relative sense of balance. In the immortal words of Mr. Miyagi, all of life balance. Go find the balance.